It started quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the subtle shifting of a tide before a storm. Financial forums, usually buzzing with routine chatter about Forex and commodities, began to hum with something different, an undercurrent of anticipation, a ripple of hope. Those who had been tracking the Iraqi dinar for years noticed subtle signs, small increases in activity, sudden mentions of banks like Wells Fargo and Chase in connection with currency exchanges, and cryptic posts hinting at major upcoming changes. For some, it was nothing more than another rumor, another fleeting spark in the long, often frustrating wait for a revaluation. But for others, this felt like the first unmistakable glimmer of what they had been waiting for, the moment when the dinar could finally rise in value, reshaping lives overnight. The morning that would change everything began like any other. The sun crept over skyscrapers in major financial hubs, casting long shadows on the streets below where people moved with the rhythm of routine. In offices and home studies alike, investors booted up computers, checked their emails, and opened trading platforms. Then, around mid-morning, the news hit. Not through official press releases or mainstream headlines, but through a leak that traveled faster than lightning across forums, private groups, and social media. Wells Fargo and Chase had released an internal contract memo revealing the exchange rate lock window for the Iraqi dinar. At first, people didn't know how to react. Some thought it was a hoax, a clever fabrication meant to provoke excitement and clicks, but the memo itself, shared as screenshots and PDF files, appeared legitimate. It was detailed, precise, and unmistakably official. It outlined specific dates and times, procedures for locking in exchange rates, and subtle notes that only experienced investors could fully interpret. The memo didn't just hint at possibilities, it provided a roadmap, a tangible plan for those who were ready to act. Across the country and beyond, individuals who had long held dinar in their portfolios felt their hearts race. Months, sometimes years, of research, patience, and careful accumulation seemed poised to pay off. Conversations on social media exploded. Threads that had been dormant for months surged with activity. People shared their interpretations of the memo, discussed strategies, and speculated wildly on the implications. "This is it," one post declared, "the moment we've all been waiting for." Another warned, "Don't rush in blindly, timing is everything." The mixture of excitement and caution created an electric atmosphere, as if the entire global dinar community had collectively leaned forward in anticipation. Among the forums, discussions turned technical. People debated the mechanics of the exchange rate lock window, comparing the leaked information to historical trends and prior revaluation attempts. Questions flew fast. How long would the lock be available? Would banks like Wells Fargo and Chase favor institutional investors, or would individual holders have a fair chance to participate? Could the memo be a precursor to broader market moves, signaling an imminent shift in global currency patterns? Each answer seemed to raise another question, and the excitement became a feedback loop, intensifying with every post and comment. Meanwhile, the banks themselves remained silent beyond the memo. There were no press conferences, no official statements, no social media announcements. This only fueled speculation further. Analysts and financial commentators pored over the memo, highlighting every nuance, every footnote. They noted the subtle language used to describe the lock window, suggesting that timing and precision were critical. Some argued that the memo represented an unprecedented transparency from major banks, while others cautioned that it could be a controlled release, designed to manage expectations while maintaining the bank's advantage in the market. The impact of the news was immediate and tangible. Trading platforms saw increased activity as people attempted to position themselves ahead of what many now believed was an inevitable shift. Investment communities buzzed with stories of individuals who had quietly accumulated dinar over the past decade, now imagining how quickly their fortunes could change. For some, it was a dream finally within reach. For others, a cautionary tale about the risks of acting too hastily. The dinar, long considered a speculative or secondary currency, suddenly became the center of attention in financial circles, discussions spilling over from specialized groups into mainstream news. Even outside the professional and enthusiast communities, the memo's release sparked interest. News websites began picking up the story, highlighting both the memo itself and the fervent online reactions. The local news anchors mentioned the potentially game-changing memo in finance segments, while blogs and independent financial analysts dissected every possible implication. Family discussions in living rooms and break-room conversations in offices reflected a shared sense of anticipation. The idea that a single memo could trigger such widespread attention underscored the power of financial information in a connected world. Yet, for all the excitement, uncertainty lingered. The memo did not guarantee revaluation. It only outlined procedures for securing a locked exchange rate should the dinar appreciate. People debated scenarios late into the night. What if the lock window was too narrow to benefit the average investor? What if sudden volatility disrupted plans? Could external geopolitical factors influence the dinar's movement before anyone had the chance to act? Each uncertainty added a layer of tension, making every post, every comment, every shared screenshot feel like part of a high-stakes puzzle. Amid this frenzy, individuals shared personal stories. One user recounted buying dinar years ago, quietly and steadily, while others mocked him for investing in what they considered an unlikely gamble. Now, he and others like him found themselves at the center of a narrative that could redefine their financial future. Stories of ordinary people holding dinar in bank accounts, drawers, or safety deposit boxes suddenly became compelling testimonies to patience and foresight. As the day progressed, more people logged into forums, eager to confirm rumors, compare notes, and gauge sentiment. The memo had not just provided information, it had created a shared moment, a collective anticipation that bridged continents and time zones. By evening, the atmosphere had shifted from mere curiosity to a tangible sense of possibility. The financial world, typically dominated by slow, moving regulatory procedures and cautious institutional behavior, seemed to have been momentarily upended. People were talking not just about exchange rates or bank procedures, but about opportunity, strategy, and the potential to transform their lives in a matter of weeks. The memo had done more than outline an exchange rate lock. It had ignited hope, sparked debate, and reminded everyone that in the world of finance, timing could be everything. As the first day of the revelation came to a close, the dinar, and the banks controlling its future, had captured the imagination of countless investors. Some were cautious, choosing to wait and observe the unfolding events, while others began planning decisive actions based on the limited window outlined in the memo. What had started as a subtle whisper among enthusiasts had transformed into a global conversation, highlighting the intricate dance between information, expectation, and action in the world of currency investment. One thing was certain, the release of Wells Fargo and Chase's memo was not just news. It was the spark of a story that would unfold over days, weeks, and potentially months, affecting countless lives and reshaping conversations around the Iraqi dinar forever. By mid-morning, the ripple of excitement surrounding the memo from Wells Fargo and Chase had grown into a wave. Screens across the world displayed the same leaked document, and investors everywhere were dissecting it line by line. The memo, initially shared as a simple PDF in private groups, now dominated financial forums, social media feeds, and messaging apps. Each line, each clause seemed loaded with potential. Traders pored over the exact dates of the exchange rate lock window, trying to calculate the most strategic time to act. Analysts debated the subtle wording. Phrases like limited duration and market discretion became topics of intense speculation. People who had spent years quietly observing the Iraqi dinar now found themselves in an unprecedented position, with a clear opportunity and a narrow window to take action. The atmosphere online was electric, chat groups filled with messages every few seconds. "Did you see the part about the 48-hour lock window?" One post asked, followed by dozens of rapid replies. Yes, but does it apply to individual holders or just institutional clients? Someone countered. Investors reference the memo with previous announcements, historical exchange trends, and even obscure financial reports. Each discovery, each new interpretation, was met with waves of excitement and skepticism. Social media influencers and finance bloggers jumped into the fray, posting videos and live streams to explain the potential significance of the memo. Their commentary ranged from cautious optimism to outright predictions of life-changing gains for those holding dinar. In homes across the globe, people gathered around laptops and tablets, reviewing the memo repeatedly. Some printed copies to study more closely, underlining sections, taking notes, and running calculations. Families whispered in living rooms about what could happen if the exchange rate lock actually worked in their favor. Long-time dinar holders shared screenshots and strategies, giving newcomers advice while also trying to gauge market sentiment. It wasn't just speculation. It felt like a game of strategy where timing, knowledge, and boldness mattered more than ever. The idea that a single memo could shift focus and behavior so quickly was a testament to how connected and information-driven the financial world had become. As discussions deepened, experts began weighing in. Financial analysts uploaded detailed breakdowns, explaining how the exchange rate lock window could operate in practice. They considered the potential advantages for Wells Fargo and Chase, suggesting that major banks could leverage the lock to manage liquidity and stabilize market expectations. Other analysts highlighted the risks. Any sudden volatility, global political developments, or regulatory changes could alter the outcome dramatically. The online community, hungry for clarity, dissected every prediction chart and table. Debates grew intense as people disagreed over which strategies were safest, which banks were most likely to dominate the process, and how small investors could realistically benefit. At the same time, skepticism remained high. Many investors had been burned by false rumors and overhyped revaluation stories in the past. Some argued that the memo could be a controlled release, a calculated measure by the banks to create anticipation without immediate action. Others feared that delays, restrictions, or hidden clauses might prevent ordinary investors from participating effectively. These cautionary voices added tension to the conversation, creating a push-and-pull between hope and realism. The narrative was no longer simply about the possibility of profit. It had become a test of judgment, timing, and research. The viral nature of the memo's release transformed ordinary days into high-stakes decision-making periods. Coffee shops and office break rooms echoed with conversations about the dinar, once a topic reserved for niche investment communities. News websites began publishing articles analyzing the memo, quoting analysts, and summarizing online reactions. Television segments covered the story, showing screenshots of the leaked document and interviewing experts. Even casual observers who had never considered currency investment found themselves drawn into the discussion, curious about why the dinar, Wells Fargo, and Chase were suddenly dominating financial headlines. In trading circles, the memo created tangible activity. People logged into their accounts, monitored exchange rates, and prepared to act as soon as the window opened. Some created detailed spreadsheets to simulate different outcomes, while others coordinated with financial advisors to assess risk. Stories emerged online of individuals who had quietly accumulated dinar over years, suddenly realizing that their long-term patience could pay off in a very short period. The memo had transformed abstract hope into actionable information, giving ordinary investors a chance to participate in a high-stakes, tightly timed financial move. Meanwhile, the banks themselves remained largely silent. Beyond the memo, there were no public statements, no press releases, and no guidance for the general public. This lack of transparency intensified speculation. Investors debated whether the banks intended to favor institutional clients over individual holders, and some argued that the memo's leak might have been intentional, a subtle signal to gauge interest, or manage market expectations. Every new comment, every shared insight became part of a larger narrative about power, access, and opportunity in the financial world. The excitement also sparked stories of personal ambition and hope. Forums were filled with posts from individuals imagining the possibilities, paying off debts, starting businesses, or securing family futures. For many, the memo represented not just financial potential, but a tangible path to long-dreamed-of goals. Others shared cautionary tales, reminding the community that markets could be unpredictable and that careful planning was essential. The mix of hope, fear, and anticipation created a sense of urgency that made the day feel like a turning point. As evening approached, the global attention remained undiminished. Analysts continued to post videos breaking down the memo, influencers offered live commentary, and investors reviewed every detail repeatedly. The excitement was punctuated by uncertainty, creating a tension that kept people glued to screens. The exchange rate lock window, though still days or hours away depending on interpretation, had already changed behavior. Investors adjusted strategies, sought guidance, and made preliminary moves, all based on the leaked memo. What began as a simple internal document had grown into a phenomenon that shaped markets, communities, and individual decisions worldwide. By the time night fell, it was clear that the memo's impact was profound. Social media feeds were flooded with analysis, screenshots, and speculation. Forums and chat rooms buzzed with strategies and debates. Even those who had doubted the potential for a dinar revaluation found themselves paying attention, curious about how events would unfold. The story of the memo had grown beyond its original context. It had become a narrative of opportunity, timing, and anticipation that captivated both seasoned investors and newcomers alike. The mid-morning leak had evolved into a global conversation, a collective anticipation that seemed to unify people across continents. Each shared screenshot, every post, every analysis video added to the momentum. The memo had not only revealed a window to lock in exchange rates, it had created a moment in time where information, hope, and strategy intersected, transforming ordinary individuals into active participants in a story that could shape financial futures. In forums, across social media, and in countless homes, people waited, calculated, and dreamed, knowing that the days ahead could bring unprecedented change. By the evening, the atmosphere surrounding the leaked memo from Wells Fargo and Chase had reached a fever pitch. What had started as whispers and speculation had transformed into tangible action, with investors around the world preparing to respond to the limited exchange rate lock window. Online forums buzzed relentlessly, live streams dissected the document line by line, and social media feeds were flooded with screenshots, charts, and strategic advice. The excitement was palpable, a mix of hope, ambition, and anxiety. For many, it was no longer just a story. It was a turning point that could redefine financial futures in ways previously unimaginable. As news of the memo spread, people began making real-time decisions. Investors who had quietly held Iraqi Dinar for years started checking balances, reviewing accounts, and planning precise actions to take advantage of the exchange rate lock. Stories emerged on forums and social media about individuals who had accumulated dinar decades ago, now envisioning the possibility of sudden, life-changing gains. Conversations shifted from speculation to strategy, with community members discussing the most efficient ways to convert currency, the optimal timing for transactions, and the best practices for minimizing risk. Each shared tip, each post fueled the momentum further, creating a collective sense of urgency. Meanwhile, financial advisors and influencers weighed in, offering analyses, warnings, and predictions. Some videos were cautious, emphasizing that the dinar market was unpredictable and that individuals should act with care. Others were more sensational, claiming that the memo signaled an imminent revaluation that could yield massive returns in a very short time frame. The blend of caution and excitement created a dynamic tension. People were simultaneously thrilled and wary, aware that the memo presented opportunity but also that timing, precision, and patience were crucial. The sense of immediacy was overwhelming. Everyone wanted to be ready the moment the exchange rate lock window opened. In trading communities, the memo had already altered behaviors. Individuals who had previously been passive began studying exchange trends, running simulations, and coordinating with peers to assess potential outcomes. Spreadsheets and calculations filled the screens of home offices and financial workspaces, each person attempting to anticipate the impact of the locked rates. Even casual observers, once uninterested in currency investment, found themselves absorbed, watching charts, following discussions, and comparing notes. The memo had effectively transformed a niche financial opportunity into a global phenomenon, capturing the attention of both novice and experienced investors. The banks themselves remained largely silent beyond the memo. This silence created both intrigue and tension. Investors debated whether Wells Fargo and Chase intended to favor institutional clients, whether the leaked memo was a test of market interest, or if it represented genuine transparency. The ambiguity heightened the stakes, making every decision feel weightier. Forums were filled with questions and conjecture. Would the memo guarantee access to the average investor? Could sudden geopolitical or economic shifts impact the exchange rate lock? How could one act quickly enough to secure a favorable position? Each unanswered question amplified the anticipation, fueling both excitement and anxiety. Amid the online chaos, stories of personal stakes began to surface. People shared their dreams, hopes, and fears with the community. One user recounted holding dinar for years, saving meticulously, and now imagining paying off debts or supporting family ambitions. Another warned of the dangers of acting impulsively, recounting prior experiences with volatile markets that had resulted in losses. These stories created a human dimension to the financial frenzy, reminding participants that beyond charts, memos, and strategy, real lives were intertwined with the outcome. It was no longer just a financial story. It had become a narrative about hope, resilience, and the pursuit of opportunity. As hours passed, the global conversation intensified. Analysts uploaded real-time commentary, comparing the memo to historical market events and offering predictions about possible outcomes. Influencers conducted live streams, engaging directly with followers, answering questions, and debating scenarios. Even mainstream news outlets picked up the story, highlighting both the memo and the widespread reactions online. Headlines proclaimed Iraqi Dinar revaluation speculation peaks, banks release memo, investors react, and exchange rate lock creates global buzz. The story had transcended its niche origins and was now a part of mainstream financial discourse. Investors began preparing tactical moves. Some coordinated with financial advisors to ensure compliance with banking procedures. Others strategized independently, tracking time zones, bank hours, and the specifics of the exchange rate lock. Discussions on forums became almost surgical, dissecting even the smallest details from the memo. Timing was critical, and each decision carried weight. A misstep could mean missing the window, while perfect execution could translate into significant financial gain. The stakes felt immediate, real, and potentially transformative. Across social media, anticipation became almost theatrical. Hashtags related to the memo trended globally, drawing attention from people who had never considered currency investment. Posts ranged from serious analysis to humorous memes about waiting for the perfect moment to act. The combination of suspense, opportunity, and communal engagement created a unique energy. People were not just following the story, they were living it, sharing experiences, speculating together, and responding to every development in real time. By late evening, discussions had begun to speculate on the broader implications. Could the memo signal an imminent global shift in currency markets? Were Wells Fargo and Chase setting the stage for other banks to follow? What would this mean for investors holding other currencies, commodities, or assets? Even those who had approached the memo cautiously found themselves caught up in the momentum, calculating potential outcomes and imagining the possibilities. The story had become a tapestry of hope, strategy, and anticipation, weaving together individuals, communities, and markets into a single narrative of suspense and potential. The most striking development was the sense of empowerment the memo had created. Individuals who had long felt sidelined in financial markets now had a concrete window to act, a clear roadmap that could reward patience and preparation. The exchange rate lock window, though limited, offered a tangible opportunity that could not be ignored. People organized, planned, and calculated, turning weeks or even years of preparation into immediate action. The memo had not only provided information, it had transformed behavior, influencing the choices, emotions, and actions of thousands worldwide. As the night deepened, the anticipation reached a crescendo. Investors watched clocks, monitored financial news, and shared updates with peers. The memo had ignited a narrative that combined suspense, strategy, and the promise of reward. Every comment, post, and video added to the collective energy, creating a sense of a global moment unfolding in real time. What had begun as an internal document, quietly released by major banks, had become a phenomenon that reshaped conversations, captured imaginations, and mobilized communities. In homes, offices, and online spaces around the world, people waited, calculated, and dreamed. They envisioned the moment the exchange rate lock window would open, imagining the possibilities that could follow. The excitement was tinged with caution, the hope balanced by uncertainty. Yet through it all, one truth remained clear. The release of Wells Fargo and Chase's memo had created a turning point, an event that would be remembered, dissected, and discussed for months to come. The Iraqi dinar, once a distant or speculative investment, now dominated global attention, and the story of the memo had become a defining chapter in the unfolding saga of currency, strategy, and opportunity. As the first night passed after the memo's release, it was evident that the world had changed, at least for those paying attention. The exchange rate lock window was no longer an abstract concept, it was a tangible opportunity, a catalyst for action, and a source of shared anticipation. Investors, analysts, and casual observers alike had been drawn into a story that blended strategy, emotion, and possibility. The memo had accomplished more than revealing a technical procedure. It had ignited hope, reshaped behavior, and united a global community around the prospect of something extraordinary. By the time the clock struck midnight in major financial centers, the world of Iraqi dinar investment had transformed. The leaked memo had done more than inform. It had mobilized, inspired, and captivated. In forums on social media and in countless private conversations, people waited, ready to act the moment the window opened. The suspense, the anticipation, and the potential for life-changing outcomes had created a story that would continue to unfold, leaving an indelible mark on those who had witnessed the beginning of this unprecedented financial moment.